So the graphic design and branding course has a pedigree of 30 plus years. I was actually on the course back in the early 90s. We've got alumni at McCann, Killen-Carter, Vogue, The Flavour People, Publish Sapient. I think Mark Stringer, the co-founder of Ahoy, was on this course on the year below me. So we've got brand creative director at Marks and Spencer's. So there's quite a lot of history here on this course. It's an industry-focused course. We concentrate really on live briefs, and we're really aiming to give students general utility in the workplace here during their study. We run a lot of live briefs, all units of live briefs on them. So that would include people like Killen-Carter, 42nd Street, BBC and Ahoy, just to mention a couple from over the years. If you've got any inquiries, please go to our website. I'm just, that's in the link as well. So you can just pop onto that, and right at the bottom, you can raise any inquiries if you need to. So I think really it just leaves for me to sort of welcome our guest really. So welcome, a big welcome to Cameron. He's 10 years graduated. What he's achieved in the 10 years is, well, it's quite shocking, and you're going to see that in a minute. He's lived and worked in Manchester and London with, on a range of agencies like Killen-Carter and Publish Sapient. He's got experience in digital branding. A lot of his work is online or screen-based. We're talking about motion design as well, UI and UX. Work with brands like Lexus.
Yeah.
Let's just see. Can we just mute our microphones? Thank you. I got that. He's worked with brands like Lexus, Saucy Fish, Jaguar, and Land Rover. And he is now currently teaching our second and third years on a live project with Killen-Carter. He's teaching them After Effects, which is fantastic. So not only is he doing a range of live sessions with our students on After Effects, he's doing a talk as well. He's really, he's really a big friend of the course. I should also mention that the Killen-Carter project is run by alumni, and Lisa Dale. We should mention you as well. So yeah, it's definitely, we've got an hour's talk here. I've had a preview of it. There's some really wonderful stuff in here, and he's kind of going to walk you through the whole experience, I think. So not just digging into what it's actually like to do a job with a really large brand and what that experience would be like, but also some tips and tricks for those of you who are studying, and what you should be doing when you're studying, and what you should be looking for, debunking some things when it comes to actually getting out into the workplace. So Cameron, without any further ado, you should be able to share your screen. Let me know if there's a problem and I'll sort that out for you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And welcome, Cameron. Yeah, Cameron.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. Yeah, hopefully this is great and informative. And like I said, any questions you have, please ask throughout. So I'll get started as soon as possible. I'll just move this out of the way. And we'll get started, because as Alex mentioned, there's a lot to get through and not a lot of time. So yeah, big brands in a digital world. So just as an introduction to myself, I'm currently living down in London, working as a freelance designer, and over the past 4 or 5 years I've been in London. I've worked with a range of global agencies, and previously I worked in Manchester for 3 years after studying, and worked at Amaze, which is now Killen-Carter. Over that time, I've been very, very lucky to work with some big brands on some great projects.
Cameron, I can't see your screen. I'm just wondering.
Really?
Yeah. Are you sharing your screen?
Yeah.
Can I just check? Can other people see Cameron's screen?
No, I can see your reel. I think the course.
Yeah. Okay.
Alex, you probably need to
Can you stop sharing, Alex?
Yeah, I'm just looking at that now.
It says we're viewing your screen, Alex. I don't know if there's a...
I'm just stopping sharing my screen. Can you pick that up now?
Yeah.
Cameron? Oh, great. I'm really sorry about that, Cameron. I just missed that because we've got some students here who are sharing.
Now our end as well.
Missed that. Is that okay, everybody? Can we see that now?
Yeah.
Great. Sorry, Cameron.
That's cool. Can you see that full screen? Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So these are some of the brands that I've worked with, both in-house at brands such as Glossier and Spock, and then as a designer at some of these agencies as well. I've been very lucky to work with a whole host of clients on some really great projects. But today I just wanted to step you through, as Alex mentioned, it's 10 years last September since I started the course. And in that time I'd like to run you through what I've kind of been up to, some learnings that I've kind of found along the way, and hopefully I can help you move into industry after your studies. So how self-initiated work can lead to working with great clients. So I actually got my first job through this course. Simon, who was a creative director at the time at Amaze, now Kin & Carter, came in to do a talk, and it was the second years that were having the talk, and I was in the third year at the time, just so happened to be sat in the studio. So I came next door and asked a lot of questions and got his details, and from there, about 4 months after graduating, he emailed and said, look, there's a junior designer role. Would you like to come in and talk to us? And I wouldn't have been in that position if I hadn't have put myself out of my comfort zone during my final major project in my third year. So in the second semester, I developed and created an app. At the time, I was using a tool called Sketch, which cost £50 that nobody had ever heard of. And now it's obviously industry standard, so that was pretty cool. And along the way, I developed a rapport on LinkedIn with several design leaders in the area. So I ended up working with a studio in Huddersfield called Date of Birth. And I worked up with them on the Midnight Memory Walk branding, as you can see here, which is a campaign for a hospice based in Huddersfield that needed a revamp and a refresh. And yeah, got that from LinkedIn. So this section, I'd like to just say how do I get noticed, and this is how I got noticed, and this is 4 things that I'd probably beg of you to do during your studies. Ask questions is huge, and that goes throughout your whole career. Exploring new tools, again, I put myself out there and bought Sketch, started using it, and it turned out to be a great tool and ended up being industry standard. Push the boundaries. So again, I put myself out there from wanting to be a print designer that loved layout and the texture and paper choosing and things like that, and put myself into a position where I wanted to explore digital, and that's now where I sit in my career. And lastly, use a studio. So the studio that's currently at the campus is incredible. It's developed even further since I was there. So just being able to use the computers, the facilities, the printers, everything they've got there, sticker makers, the lot is there to be used. And I'd stress that you use it as much as you can whilst you're studying. And that goes for external kind of things such as laser cutting, screen printing, paper painting, anything to do kind of mark make and develop those skills, because in the industry you kind of lose that opportunity and have to move a lot quickly. So definitely enjoy your studies while you can. So in the years after that, I worked for Amaze or Kin & Carter for 3 years and decided to make the move down to London. But I had to curate my portfolio to help support that career choice. So in the industry, there is more than just a designer. There's UX designers, UI designers, motion designers, product designers, copywriters, web designers, interaction designers, the list goes on. And I've met all people from different studies that all have either studied graphic design that moved into this, or studied industrial design and moved into this, or 3D product design and moved into to become a motion designer or a product designer. So the door's always open for that. So you don't have to necessarily cubbyhole yourself into being a graphic designer. You can certainly be a graphic designer if that's what you wish, but there's more opportunities out there, and I definitely, yeah, as I say, there's so many more roles than just being a designer. And designers don't just have to design. You can move into motion, which the course obviously promotes now, and I'm part of that, which is great. And at the time, I didn't, there wasn't motion on the course when I was learning, but I taught myself in my first junior designer role. So how do you curate a portfolio? But I'll tell you what I did. So as I moved down to London, there was this role as a product designer, and I was like, what the hell is a product designer? I've been a junior designer, but I don't know what a product designer is. So I looked at the job description, and this is the actual company that I worked for, W12 Studios, or a big product design studio that works with the likes of Verizon, Virgin, lots of huge clients across the world, and they were tiny kind of makeup in London. There's only about 30 people there. And this section from the job description was the area that I focused on, and that was demonstrate experience or interest in visual product and UX, along with practical and technical knowledge to support ideas, which is something that you will learn on the course, you know anyway. But the thing that really stood out to me was that you have to demonstrate an experience or interest. And that section of experience or interest, you can't show interest in being a doctor and get a role as a doctor, but in your career, you can show an interest in a particular area. And for me, that was product design, and get the job. So how did I do that? I used this to my advantage, and I built the portfolio that I wanted. And you can too. So what you can do is curate a mix of project work and self-directed work to create the perfect portfolio for you. And you can do this 4 times over for different roles with different studios. Certainly in my next work as I moved to Publicis Sapient after W12 Studios, again, I curated that portfolio to be a lot more bigger technical builds of website and less about product. And that kind of evolves, and you can evolve that with your own projects and with project work too. And this is an industry truth that I was taught in my first job as well, is don't use the final output, use your final design. And what I mean by that is that you don't have to use what's built online as the final website or whatever. Use the final design that you were happiest with, how it was meant to be designed, because sometimes things don't get built the same. Clients can intervene, time can intervene, some things might get missed. So what I would definitely promote you to do is use your final design in your portfolio rather than a screenshot of the live website, because it could be very different. And that goes for print work, because things might change. It might change hands with designers and things like that. So yeah, this is where I found myself at W12 Studios, after never designing an app when I was at Kin + Carta, to be able to design, which is essentially this project called VU, which is essentially the Netflix in Belgium. So we designed the whole product in 9 months, which was an iOS app, an Android app, an iPad app, and the TV app alongside a website experience as well. So it was essentially designing Netflix in 9 months. So we looked at the different controls for the player, and then how you actually searched and navigated around these movies. And again, this is something that I was so nervous about moving down to London and moving into an area of design that I'd not really approached before, to then being able to work on a huge project like this and deliver it too. So what's it like working for a global branding agency? So there's a caveat. This took me a long time and a good few goes at different agencies. So I didn't stay in the same place for very long. I was at W12 Studios for 9 months. I was at Kin + Carta for 3 years. and I was at Publicis Sapient for about 18 months before going freelance, which I'll move on to in a bit. But I moved around, and some people might say that that's a negative, but I found it very positive. I created a lot more connections, and especially in my early freelance days, this really came into play, because the amount of contacts I had that either recommended me or I got in touch with that pushed me into different roles that I've had now, and I'm very grateful for that. But there are a lot of myths that surround the industry, so I thought we'd debunk some today, and then if there's any questions afterwards, we can answer some of those. This is one that you see all the time, is the industry is fast-paced and you only have a day to design things, which isn't necessarily true. Yes, you might have a day to design things, but it might not be. You don't have one day to design a full website. It might be something small like a social media post or something like that. So your training doesn't stop when you graduate. When you get your first job, you're going to be more than capable of moving at a faster pace than you would on the day that you started studying. So, and this goes for the day today. I'm a lot faster than the day I was a junior designer. But the thing to understand in the industry is that change happens. And there's lots of different changes that can happen. People changes, roles change, budgets change, clients change, leaders change, businesses change, directions change, and the industry itself actually changes as well. And these are things that you can't really prepare for. And that's fine, because you will learn skills that you can only learn in the industry whilst working. And that's something that, as I mentioned, it's fine to not know as you move into them. The industry is an amazing place rather than a scary place. It's not fast paced, it's just efficient, because it's a business at the end of the day. And you will learn to become more efficient, and with efficiency comes speed. So the whole area around having to be a fast designer isn't necessarily the truth. So myth number 2, but I've never designed a website, how can I work on that project? You'll realize that all your skills are transferable, and more so than you realize. So typography in layout or production is exactly the same as on a website or on a screen. They don't change. You use the same tools, you use the same type tool to lay out the same type box. And those skills allow you to be able to move into different things. So whether that's an app or a website or anything like that. And you're not on your own. You're going to be surrounded by a team of people that have done it a million times with years of experience. And it's amazing what you can learn by the people who sat next to you on that project. And when you're a junior designer or in your first role as a designer, you're going to be supported, you're going to learn, and you're going to be able to work at your own pace to be able to understand what the process is for that particular project, understand how the client works, because every client works differently. And yeah, you might move around different project teams as that goes. So with the right attitude and desire to learn, you'll go far. And I think that's definitely one thing that people look for in your first job interview, is that they're not necessarily looking for the best designer in the world. They're looking for the person with the right attitude that they can grow and develop with, and that has the desire to learn. So attitude is a huge thing. And again, this course that you're on or currently looking to join will develop your skills to be able to have that right attitude and that desire to learn. And myth number 3 is, I work at a design agency, so that means everybody loves design. Unfortunately not. So in the industry, you'll be working with teams built up of many different disciplines. You can have account managers, you're going to have project managers, you can have technical people that actually develop and build. And that's something that unfortunately you can't control. So it's super important to understand how your role as a designer can help. And this industry truth here is that not everyone will see things from a designer's perspective. And it's important to know the role of the role design plays in a project. And this is, again, something you will learn. This is something that you can take forward. And it's good just to be able to fight the design's corner, because not every time it'll win. Just because you're working for a design agency doesn't mean that design's the first thing on people's minds. And there's sometimes a lot of convincing in design as well. So learning to present your work and develop your work alongside other teams is super important. And that's what's great about the studio as well, is that you can bounce ideas off people and the tutors and develop a design in a different perspective that you would see just sat in your room. But there are lots more. So I didn't know if there's any questions at this point. We're kind of about halfway. So if there's any questions around the industry or anything that I can answer, and I'll probably move through that very, very quickly. But if there are any questions, you can either drop them into the chat and I'll read them out, or you can shout up.
Cameron, I'm just going to take the floor for a sec and say to anybody, please do raise any questions. Just unmute your mic. Obviously, I always have questions, so I certainly have one or two that I will be asking you if nobody raises their hand. So just give it a second. Okay. And I don't think we've got any in the chat. I'll just check that. No, not at the moment. Okay. So my main question to you is if, two things. Firstly, there's so many points there, I think, that are worth going back over, because it takes a minute for them to detonate in people's heads, the weight of the point that you've made. So there's a lot of really good points there that I think, people can go back to and really consider. So thank you for that. But how do you design something you've never designed before? Like, that's what would terrify me. If I was studying, and like you said, you were given this opportunity to design an app or do whatever, and you've never done it before, you seemed very relaxed about that when you said that. If it were me, I'd be anything but relaxed. So obviously you can't tell us exactly how you cope with one specific situation, but like technically, but how do you manage when faced with something entirely new to do? How do you manage to feel ready?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. And I think, I'll probably come across relaxed now, but I think at the time, you're probably right, I was anything but when I was in the industry, especially when I was at Kin & Carter as a junior, the amount of experience and the amount of designers around me, there was probably a team of 30 designers sat on this huge desk in the office. There was questions flying around all the time. How do I do this on Photoshop? How do I do that? So, and it was just that comfort of knowing that, I was a junior with a senior above me who had an art director above them, who had a creative director above them. And I was in a situation where, it's not like I was sat on my own having to work things out. It's a team sport design, and it's hard to imagine what it's like moving into industry, because when you're studying, you are a one-man band, one-person band that has to do everything. When in industry, that's not necessarily the case. But in doing so, you'll be ready to move into that role.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that's good answer. I got Poppy, I recognise the name Poppy from yesterday. I think she was at the UCAS fair, saying, is graphic design all about digital, or can you work 3D? Now, I'm assuming, Poppy, you might need to clarify this, but I'm assuming, Poppy, what Poppy means is it all about screen design, or can it be physical? Poppy, just pop something in the chat there if I've got that wrong. I think Poppy is doing A-levels or GCSEs at the moment. So
that's what I mean.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, traditionally graphic design isn't screen-based at all. Graphic design would be print-based, very traditionalist design. But luckily, the graphics and branding course covers screen-based design now. It covers motion. I don't think it covers 3D, but that's definitely a door that you can open up. And if not, a course exists already, or the motion team will work on that, I imagine, Alex. You'll have to...
I think what Poppy means by 3D is like real stuff. So rather than what we might mean by 3D, which is like 3D modeling. So Poppy, I think the answer to that question is I think you're a different Poppy. Okay, never mind. What are the chances of that? Okay. So I think you've probably answered that question, Cameron, in saying that design can be real world signage, t-shirts, books, posters, stuff things like advertising can be, on the side of billboards, etc. But screen design is a relatively new thing. And that's one of the reasons we're featuring you and we're featuring it in the course. Yeah. It is difficult, I think, when you haven't worked in graphics at all or studied, it is quite difficult to understand the difference between screen, what we mean by that. But basically anything that's on your phone or on a laptop is considered digital or screen design. I know we've got another question here. We're going to have to just move these reasonably quickly, but I think Alex was saying somewhere here about how ready did you feel for your first job after graduating?
Can't really remember, but I imagine thinking back to the process of applying for hundreds of jobs, I probably was pretty scared. I definitely wasn't searching for one particular job or the perfect job. It was very much a catch-all of apply for lots of jobs, go for lots of interviews, get offered quite a couple of jobs as well, and turn some down that weren't necessarily right. You will feel ready because you've done 3 years working up to that point. You might not necessarily feel comfortable, but you'll be ready in terms of being a well-rounded designer that's ready for industry.
So in a lot of ways, we often say we're teaching students to get ready to learn for the rest of their lives. Is that quite? I think that kind of covers your question as well, Freya, a little bit. We'll probably have to move on. Alex, I think you already had a question in, so we'll have to move on, but we'll try and come back to some of these questions. Please raise them again if you feel questions haven't been answered later on. I know that Cameron's going to dive into a project now. So, yeah.
Cool.
Ready for this.
So yeah, the life of a creative freelancer. So now since 2019, I left my job at Publicis Sapient and decided to go freelance. Kind of glad because when the pandemic hit, I was at the mercy of working from home like everybody else, but that allowed me to really hustle and find new clients and new work, which I did successfully. So I'm probably one of the few people that the pandemic helped in terms of a business. But I'd like to talk you through a project that I did when I was at an agency called Rehab. You can check them out. I think it's rehab.ai is their website. They're an innovation agency, again, very small, probably about 30 people. Design team is probably a creative director, a senior designer, and a junior designer. So there's only 3 people, but there's a whole creative team that encompasses copy, art directors, and creative technologists as well, which are like kind of a hybrid between a designer and a developer. So the Nike Infinity Run, Nike React Infinity Run is a new shoe developed by Nike. So the brief was to develop an elevated digital experience that materializes the benefits of the Nike React Infinity Run and seamlessly routes into the Nike Run Club ecosystem. So what does that mean? So a digital experience, in this case, we had complete freedom. Nike hired us because we were an innovation agency that we could develop either a website, an app, or anything in between to help sell this shoe. And the seamlessly routes into the Nike Run Club ecosystem is, I don't know if you know, but the Nike Run Club is an app which allows you to track your runs and things like that. And it has different guided runs. So they wanted to essentially connect a product to a digital experience, which is super exciting. So they sent us lots of insight. And injury is the #1 Google search for runners. And fear of injury is the #1 reason runners stop running. So with that, Nike started to develop a product. They partnered with the British Columbia Sports Medicine Research Foundation in Canada to develop the Nike Infinity Run, designed to reduce injury and keep runners running. So Nike had obviously developed hundreds of sneakers throughout the years, specifically for running, but have never been able to knock down the numbers of the amount of runners that get injured. So then they developed this new shoe and then put it into product development. So they got 226 testers over 12 weeks who ran over 60,000 miles, over 11,000 runs, and finally finishing up with 136 half marathons. And the image on the right hand side is actually these runners that they signed up to the program. So they did their final half marathon. You can see them with the medals, and photographed them directly at the finish line. And that was their art direction. That was their campaign imagery, is that they got real runners to run using this shoe, and to prove to people that they can train for a half marathon without getting injured with this new shoe, to then use it for their art direction, was pretty amazing. So all of this research, all of this product development, and all of this art direction was developed into what Nike call a visual center. So this visual center includes concepts, strategy, products, the mock-ups for advertising, the brand guidelines, as well as sending all the research that they worked with the British Columbia Foundation with as well. So it was a lot to unpack at the beginning of a project. So we formed a team. So the team consisted of an account director, who is essentially head of client services, a technical director, which is lord of the developers, front-end developer, an iOS developer, producer, also known as a project manager, who focus on timing, a creative director, 2 creative leads. So in the industry, you might find you work with a creative team, which is composed of a copywriter and an art director who work as a team to develop concepts, a senior designer, which was myself, a UX designer, and a 3D designer. So we had this brief. So we decided to do a mobile first experience for the pre-purchase journey. So this is to attract people that visit Nike Town in London or any of the Nike shops across the world, to interact with the digital experience before they purchase the shoe. So the concept was to visualize the pain of injury and the freedom of prevention of injury, which sounds very complex, but in its simplest form, it was essentially creating an AR experience to explore the 3 most common running injuries in AR. So I'd never worked in augmented reality before. And again, this is a prime example of what the hell am I doing on an AR project? How do I navigate this? But again, with the industry kind of experts around me, whilst working at Rehab, it became soon very comfortable and quite exciting to learn something new. So the reason why we chose an augmented reality experience is that we had all of these textures from the new shoe. So it had like a knitted upper, and it's got this huge foam base on it. I don't know if anyone's actually got these shoes, but they're super, super comfy and really wide. So we looked at the product development information that they sent us and looked into how this shoe had been created. And we wanted to use those textures and use those foam kind of softness that the shoe helps you to prevent injury to our advantage. So then we also looked into the 3 most common running injuries. So runner's knee. So we did some research of our own. So we asked people around us and friends and family if they'd ever had a running injury, and these were the 3 most common injuries that came up. And these are some of the quotes from the people. I won't read them out because they're a little bit, if anyone's squeamish, but essentially it was to create a visual representation of these 3 injuries. So Achilles tendinopathy is very like essentially your Achilles going rock hard. So we looked at these like solid references of concrete breaking and smashing up. And then Shin Splints was very much around small splinters and shards in a kind of metallic light lit up effect. And I don't know if these are coming through on the stream, but these were the 3 references that we presented to Nike as part of our development. And essentially we wanted to create this experience where people could explore around the Nike store in AR, either on an iPad or on their phone, most likely, and explore this shoe as you're right next to it. So as we started to develop these textures, we translated those references and those quotes into something that we felt like represented these injuries, which is quite abstract in itself, but it soon became something that we were quite enjoying because it's yeah, how do you visually represent an injury without putting somebody's face in pain? So yeah, the shin splints became this glass metallic shards. Achilles tendinopathy became these kind of almost like molten rock with kind of like these rubies exploding from them. And runner's knee was kind of this gelatinous blob that we developed that kind of feels quite squeamish and painful, but it was part of our project. So then we worked with a 3D designer in India, Guri, she was called. She was amazing, super talented. And these are the kind of the initial wires that we got from her. So you can see that she'd created these flat representations that we designed and developed them into a 3D object that you could explore that moved. This runner's knee really came to life. And again, you can see the wireframe on the left that she'd really put some detail into it to bring it to life. And the shin splints, this one was probably the one that we developed the most. This was, again, almost like a metallic glass with shards appearing from it. So yeah, this is super cool. So then we were left with these 3 textures, but we didn't have an experience. To be honest, throughout this whole process, and this is something that Paula on the course actually taught me. I don't know if Paula's still there, but Paula said this to me whilst I was studying, and this is something that I take with me all the time in everything that I do, and that's to take time away from your projects when you get stuck. 24 hours away from work helps you to create a fresh perspective. And I think it was on my final major project, I was sat in the studio next door to where Alex is sat today, and I was stressed out of my head about this app that I'd forced myself into designing. And he said, go away for 24 hours, go play football, go to the pub, do whatever, just stay away from work for 24 hours. And I came back the next day and you kind of see everything with fresh eyes. And that's something that I do today if I can. Obviously in the industry, sometimes you don't get the novelty of taking 24 hours off, but definitely if you can do that while studying, definitely take this with you. So then we moved into the UX. So we were working with a UX designer who was incredible at sketching. So he'd sketch out this shoe so we could develop this app. So the app essentially had to encompass a user journey. And this is something that, again, industry standard, something that we develop is what are the steps that the users go through? So we had a landing page that introduced the shoe and the goal of reducing injury, exploring those injury kind of representations and visualizations that we've just seen, and exploring the product benefits, and then going behind the design to see how that product's been developed to create positive impact. And then linking off to the NRC, the Nike Running Club, as we mentioned at the start of the brief. So then we storyboarded this experience. So we didn't really involve necessarily any mobile screens at this point. We just kind of mocked it up. And again, this is the whole process of going through. So this is multiple presentations to the client, going back, amending, developing. We know that we needed to show the different injuries. We know that we needed to show the product itself, and we needed to link it to the NRC. So we storyboarded that out. So with it being an AR experience, we had to obviously create some kind of onboarding and permissions to get people access to people's cameras, to get access to their GPS so they could move around the objects in a 3D space. All these kind of technical obstacles that I would have never considered with just designing an app or a website. Bringing the element of AR really pushed it to its limits. And this is where we finish with the experience. So you can see the person in the middle, which would have their phone, and the GPS location of yourself then populates the injuries, the introduction, and the shoe around you. And then you can kind of move in 360 around that to be able to explore it. So these are the final screens of where we got to. So we had these really nice onboarding screens. We worked on the copy together, as I mentioned before. We had the creative team working on it. So they came up with "Don't let running stop you from running," which is super nice. And then we had to create an onboarding screen to allow people to understand how they navigate the pains and the injuries and find the shoe to explore. So we created this navigation which allowed people to check off the 5 areas, so they knew kind of, we can orient them within the 3D experience. So as you explored the injuries, each one of those circles that you can see on the right hand side there kind of filled in color to show that you'd check them off and know that you completed the experience, and then you can move on to purchase the shoe. And then we had this kind of 3D expanded shoe as well developed, so you can interact with each of the components that Nike developed with the British Columbia Foundation. So the upper, which kept your shoe, your foot solid in the shoe, the wider base, which allowed greater stability. So we were able to sell the shoe, but in a 3D environment, and also allow the user to actually pick the shoe up in store too. And all of this just ended up in 19 screens, which I was laughing to myself as I was looking at this, creating this presentation, is that these 19 screens were about a 6-week project, and quite a lot of stress along the way as well. But it was a super enjoyable experience. Obviously, working in AR for the first time was great, and working with a larger client like Nike was super interesting. But the one thing that I will say is that client management is an essential skill to learn while you're studying, as it is a daily practice in industry. And this really came to light with Nike. They weren't the easiest client to work with in the world. They were certainly great, and they certainly knew what they were doing, but they weren't the easiest. They had such a high caliber of effort, and they wanted everything to be correct and to be spot on. Obviously, they'd spent millions on developing this shoe, and our experience had to reflect that. So yeah, that was the project. And I kind of spun through that very quickly because I know we're short of time, but if there are any questions, do let me know and I can go back through.
Thank you, Cameron. Can you hear us all right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I lots of questions. It's really quite interesting because the DNA debriefs, which you recognise what that means, and some of the second years of working on DNA debriefs have some of those elements in mind. I'm thinking of you, Hataka, here, particularly. And before I start raising questions, I'm going to open out to anybody else, because I think it takes a minute for people to type stuff into the chat. Certainly does me. I have to Google spell check everything. But some people here are saying that's very interesting. I think you can see that in the chat. Yeah. So what I thought was most interesting about this is not only is it a huge brand, but it's a cutting edge project. So graphics is just such a broad area. And if anybody's looking at studying, go and have a look at our website. The links in the chat, because you'll see such a wide range of examples of different areas to work in. This as a piece of work is right up there. It's very now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, 2019, it was like, the era of Snapchat filters and everything that was kind of really allowing people to create them themselves. So I think it was that kind of knowledge and trend at the time that pushed us to do this AR experience. And I think it really paid off in people purchasing the shoe.
I'm just waiting for some more questions to come in. Somebody's Freya saying that was ace. Please do pop your mic on, just because I'm speaking and Cameron's speaking doesn't mean anybody else needn't butt in. Do you have any questions? No. I'm still waiting. So yeah, I do have a question.
Yeah.
How many different visualizations did you have for pain before you settled on those?
Quite a lot, but as I mentioned, these quotes really helped us because the project team had never actually experienced any of these pains or injuries from running. So doing our own piece of research really helped us to, create these visualizations. To get to this point here where we were kind of comfortable, obviously you can see the transition between these and the final output were, fairly close. So there were lots of different iterations in between these, those reference videos that I showed you a second ago and these. But it was very much done. We didn't actually create these. We Googled these. We found references. We, searched the web and searched all sorts to find these different elements and textures that we wanted to create. And then working with the 3D designer to actually build them and bring them to life. Was a main part of the process.
It's a very artistic interpretation of an experience, because essentially you're taking experience and you're creating something that represents that experience and makes us think about it, which is that's very much in the arts, isn't it? The fact that it's a visual communication piece and it's a branding piece puts it into graphics. How open were Nike? Sorry, correct me.
Yeah, Nike.
Yeah. He knows. I'm not gonna challenge that, am I? How open were Nike to that as a concept?
They loved the concept. The level of kind of intensity of these visualizations, as I mentioned, like people can be quite squeamish, and I think they were worried about how real these visualizations were. So they were very sure on that we didn't want to show anything that was kind of the human anatomy, bones or legs or anything like that. So we did have to keep it quite abstract. And I think that's why it paid off, because these three representations, especially when they're brought to life in motion, were so different and not really, if you've not been injured with any of these injuries, then you probably wouldn't make that assumption. But maybe the odd few that had runner's knee go, oh yeah, that really kind of feels like it's resonating with me on that, because I suffered that pain. But yeah, so Nike loved the concept, but definitely took some easing into to get them warmed up to the idea of these quite graphic visualizations.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got some questions coming in here. People saying it's a very interesting project and very artistic. And but one question, was it a pinch you moment? This is from Freya, working with Nike. Did you ever think, like when you were studying, did you think, oh, one day I'll be working with Nike?
No, never. I think the interesting thing is that I think even when I started working with Nike in 2019, I've been in the industry 5 years and I've not been anywhere near Nike, Facebook, Google, or any of the really, really big brands, because, they usually would lay with the top agencies. And then as I moved into working with rehab, they had Facebook, Google, Nike, Converse, all these huge brands. So it's just these different roles that open the doors and opportunity to working with Nike. And as I said, I've worked with better clients than Nike in terms of the experience of working with them. Nike are a huge corporation, as you know, and budgets can be quite tight and things can get cut off in the middle of projects. So as exciting as it is with working with Nike, it's not necessarily the creme de la creme of working. Hopefully Nike never watch this, but yeah.
Yeah, let's see. And a similar question: how much do you have to adapt your way of working to different clients and projects? So,
yeah, great question. I mean, you have to do it a lot. I think something that I didn't really cover in this, but should have done really, is that you'll work with different design leaders, whether that be different creative directors, different art directors that will lead projects in different ways and come from different backgrounds. So I've worked with creative directors before that don't actually come from a graphic design background, but they are creative directors in their own right, and they might be from a copywriting background. So the project and process and client change infinite times over. You can't really, there is no true design process in the industry. There's, best practices and things like that, and, the go-to research, development, design kind of process, but they're very broad strokes, and the intricacies of each project can change quite a lot. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, but yeah, it changes all the time, and you'll change too, and you'll learn a lot from it. Because if you did the same thing over and over again, it'd get bloody boring, wouldn't it?
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, we've got another one here from Hataka is saying, well, we've got one from Mark Harris, which we'll have to feature. Mark, you can speak, surely. Put the mic on. 1 minute. Let's just try Hataka.
Alex, sorry. I was just, I put the camera on, but I am a COVID sufferer today, so apologies.
Oh, are you? Okay.
Yeah, I did my test one. Cam, that was brilliant. I was just putting a note to say thank you. I popped in for half an hour. So during 2:30, that was brilliant. I got the link through Alex. It was, I think like I put in the message, be very proud of what you've achieved. It sounds fantastic what you're doing, and you know, part of the purpose of this is to inspire others. And if the students on the call aren't inspired or given confidence what you've done, then they should be, and hopefully will be. So thanks for that, and good luck what we do next. And I will, when I recover, I will buy some Nike trains if it gets me through the next half marathon that I'm going to do. Thank you, Cam.
Yeah, go for it. Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Brilliant work. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks very much. Mark's one of the principalships. So thanks very much for coming along there, Mark. Really appreciate that.
Welcome. Thank you.
Regardless of the suffering you're clearly going through.
Get well soon.
Cheers. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.
Alex, can I jump in?
Yeah, I've just bear in mind I've got a question from Hataka after that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Short and really. Cameron, some of the students working on D&AD projects at the moment, and obviously each individual project has a target audience. Can you reiterate the importance of designing with that target audience? You know, like with this Nike project, how information and data collected help to translate into the design that we can see on the screen. You know, like with the injuries, etc. You know, that information that you get from the target audience, and how important it is to sort of project the designs into sort of unique and original places.
Yeah, definitely. I think it, as you mentioned, it is very important to look at the audience. The interesting thing with Nike is that everybody out there has a piece of clothing from Nike, or some shoes from Nike, or has owned shoes from Nike in the past. So we very much focused on, you know, these running addicts for this project, people that were running half marathons and 10Ks. Anything below that, you know, we're happy for them to purchase a shoe, but we were very much focusing on these people that are going to train, and that allows us to talk in a different way. So because we know that these are experienced runners, we can use language that refers to them, and we don't have to do it to, you know, Joe Blogs that's run once a year kind of thing. So that changes the outlook of the project as well. But yeah, it's super important, and I think working with different brands will allow you to understand different target audiences, different ways of laying out things. You might use a different hierarchy, you might use larger copy, smaller copy, different fonts, colors. Everything kind of relates back to that target audience, so it can really shape your project and your output.
Thank you.
Hataka's asking, so you mentioned that not everyone at a studio thinks as a designer. What other ways of thinking are worth considering while doing design? I think that's the center of the question. It does also say, and what's the role or position of the designer on this tricky situation? So I think what other hats are worth putting on is probably the main thrust of the question here.
Yeah, I think one that I pulled out would be, you know, this final one, which is super important. And this is something, again, Alex reiterated to me on the project and taught me. So definitely ask him about this. And I imagine he teaches us still in the course, but client management is an essential skill. And that is a broad way of being able to understand and manage the team that you're working with as well, because it's not necessarily client management, it's probably people management, as it should really say. So it's important to consider this. You don't have to think like an account manager, you don't have to think like a developer. you just have to understand the importance of design in a role. And sometimes you might be on the end of a losing battle, or you might be, come through and really feel strong about something, so you'll push forward for it. But if I was to answer your question with one thing, it would be, this people management, client management, because emotions can run high within business, especially when it comes to money, deadlines, and things like that. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question. Let me know if that doesn't.
I think it probably does. Yeah, I'm just waiting to type back. I'm going to ask for last questions now, and while people are just typing that in, I just wanted to say one thing briefly. The content of your talk is quite highbrow, and you're going from a sort of starting position to a very high concept position with the client, where you're thinking about the client and how to answer a question for the client. But at the same time, you've designed this presentation, right?
Yeah.
You've put the presentation together.
Yeah.
You've done all the typography.
Yeah.
Did all the content, how it communicates. You worked out how it was going to. So from that perspective, I always think graphics is a really interesting subject. I can't think of one where you need such a keen eye on detail, but you also have to have a really good grasp of emotive big picture and strategy. My analogy is always, architecture and bricklaying. It's like a combination of both those things in a creative world, so that you can make a career out of your creativity. But it's a very unusual combination, like the spread of strategy through to sort of artworking and attention to detail. How important, how have you found that the combination of those two things, how they served you? Do you see a distinction between the two, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned that, actually, because it's something that I kind of do, without thinking now, is you put that narrative and that story together to get your point across, and hopefully that came through today in the presentation. But it wasn't until I started working with W12 that I really understood how to put a really good story together. I don't know if, like, on the slides, really just put one thing on a slide kind of thing was that's simplifying it, but they really knew how to tell a story by just having one thing on a slide, making your point and moving on from that. Something that was digestible. You don't want lots of text on so people are, at the screen reading it or anything like that. So yeah, it's one thing designing, it's another thing presenting that work back and either rationalizing it in a client presentation, or what I did today, which is more of a, if I sent you this presentation, you wouldn't be able to kind of understand it that well, because there's no text on the screen, so there's different ways of presenting as well. So there's presentations that you talk to, and then there's presentations that you can send away and people can read away in their own time, and those are two very different things and two very different skills.
And did both of those things appeal to you? The architecture and the sort of craftsmanship of both those things about the subject. Did that appeal to you? Did that?
Only when I saw it done well. Only when I saw it done well, because you'll know when someone mentions PowerPoint to a designer or a student learning, they'll cringe or hide away from it because nobody wants to work in PowerPoint.
I mean, in general, like say with your final major project, you had to have an idea, it had to have a concept, and the concept had to work, and it had to make sense and be meaningful. But at the same time, you had to make sure you hadn't spelt an error, you made a spelling error on something, or that, there was a consistency, that level of detail, attention to detail and strategy.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, attention to detail is something that, like, people look for, and they will pull you up on it if you're sloppy on that kind of side of things, and you'll learn the hard way sometimes, as I have with, things are just about to go to print with a spelling mistake on or whatever, as has happened before. But yeah, it's definitely something you can learn very quickly, just through checking your work and developing that eye for detail. And some people it comes more naturally than others. I was more kind of OCD about it, so it was easy for me. But some people, yeah, it's definitely a skill to learn through learning and seeing it done well, and picking up points from people.
I agree. We all learn the hard way. That's how we learn. Yeah. Okay. Well, look. Thank you very much, Cameron. We're getting some thanks through on the text, on the chat at the moment. So I think we've probably come through all the questions that we need to. Your time is massively appreciated. I mean, I think people now can see that guest speakers that share their work don't just have presentations and this stuff in the bag and they just pull out and go, oh yeah, that's for this one, that's for, all these things need thinking about. Takes a lot of time, not to mention the amount of time and sessions that you spent teaching and helping our students with cutting edge stuff like After Effects and motion graphics, and sharing your motion graphics projects with them. So it's been fabulous. I don't know whether
listening to me.
I don't know whether Paolo wants to say anything before we close.
Thank you. Amazing.
Yeah, Paolo's just saying thank you, amazing. I'm just going to share my screen and just let me know if you can see this.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I would say is that, and now Cameron's going to die. Somewhere in these case studies, yeah, there you go. There's a case study on Cameron. So if you, let me just see, where are we? Where are you, Cameron? He is somewhere. There he is. So if you did want to see some of Cameron's work when, I'm not going to go down it, but if you want to see, I'll just peek. There we go. If you want to see some of Cameron's work when he first, when he graduated from the course, you can see that there, and then you can compare the two. That, I think that might be useful for people. So don't forget to pop on the website and have a look at Cameron's case study. It is worth looking at. Also, just to reiterate, you can contact me just by clicking apply now, and that will go down to our details. And also, we've got our Twitter and Instagram account, which again, they're worth looking at. We've got Cameron there teaching, and loads and loads and loads of students' work. And we will also promote talks on Instagram when they come about. I think pretty much that's it. If you need to inquire, you can do that through our social media. And otherwise, I think it just leaves for me to say thank you, and well done, Cameron. Thank you very much. I think Cameron is coming back for those students. Is it next week or the week after? Week after, right. So Cameron will be back in for us week after, so you can see him and run your work past him. So in the meantime, thank you very much, and please do feel free to pop any thanks into the chat. They're already coming in. Keep an eye on Instagram, where we will promote the next talk. And we're very grateful for those of you who have attended. And for those of you watching a recording, thank you for watching. Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, bye.